Sam, just give Sam one moment.
Huh?
Sam's going to start the live stream, and then she'll come over and do roll call.
Oh,
Okay?
Well, Sam's doing double duty today.
Yes.
Take it easy.
Take your time.
that's a good move. So this is Town of Carefree Public, for the Board of Adjustment meeting. Do I have a roll call and pledge allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Even the wokes.
You or me, Stacy?
Go ahead, Tom.
Which meeting are we in?
The Board of Adjustment meeting.
1 to 5 o'clock, the yellow one.
The 5 o'clock.
The yellow
one.
meeting.
Yellow meeting. 5 o'clock.
Do you have a roll call ready?
I think Sam took roll call.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the first item is approval of the Board of Adjustment meeting dated August 22nd, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Item number 2. You gonna help us out from here on out?
I can take it from there, sure. We are looking at a variance case tonight. It is case number 2213V. The applicants are Mr. and Mrs. Adam and Nikki Trisler, and the property is located in the original Carefree plat at 7245 Long Rifle Road. The applicant is looking for a variance to build a new single-family home. So specifically with the request, it's twofold. Although one is truly a variance request, the other is a fill waiver, which under the Board of Adjustment, you may also make an action on that as well. So the request is to allow for an encroachment of 25 feet into the front yard setback, where typically 60 feet is required to locate the residence itself. And also, there is a request to allow for more fill than cut under the building pad, and I think we've talked about this before. That's a zoning ordinance requirement. It helps sort of manage sort of a fair finished floor elevation for a property. But they're looking to exceed some of that, exceed cut under the building pad in order to meet town requirements related to floodplain design. So I just put this up here. It was in your report as well, but just to sort of, I think this is new for us, for many of you members, and so just to sort of understand the process and what you're acting on as the Board of Adjustment. And a variance is basically about if somebody cannot enjoy their lot or develop their lot with the same rights as somebody else based on certain characteristics of the property. And so a lot of times, and we call that as a hardship, and in a lot of cases, hardship tends to be the size of the lot, but we do run into circumstances where it's shape, it's topography, location or surroundings, and things such as significant washes. So what a variance lets you do is you can grant one as long as you're not if you're not applying it as a special privilege, meaning that you like the applicants or you like what the home looks like. It's because there is a hardship, and that's what you're acting on in terms of the request. And again, the circumstances cannot be self-imposed by the property owner, meaning that, well, you know, I could do it the right way, but I don't want to. I want my house higher on the lot, or there's circumstances that are, so we look at things that are not self-imposed, for example, like the washes on this property. And the Board of Adjustment, in its purview through this process, you can prescribe any conditions or stipulations related to the development. So with that said, just to understand the location, you can see it's in our original Carefree plat. It's on sort of the bend of Long Rifle Road. It's just a little bit lower than some of the properties adjacent and across the street from it. And looking closer, even from that last arrow, you could see that you could see sort of the waterways on the property. This just sort of highlights a little bit more, as well as shows some of the other features such as large boulders. But most importantly, this highlights, and we'll look at the site plan in a little bit more detail, that you've got basically there's two lots that converge, creating kind of a third lot. Each of these lots have, and I hope you read about in your reports, flow rates that exceed 50 cubic feet per second. So in our ordinance, we do not allow you to relocate those waterways. This also shows you, again, some of those conditions on the property. As you're somewhat, I think this is from the middle of the property, looking south and also facing west. So there's a lot of challenges on this property. So with the site plan, and I think this is what really highlights, you can sort of see the area that is sort of left over in a sense for a home to be developed. And so with these washes and maintaining their alignments, they also have what we call erosion setbacks. So again, we recommend that people try to build outside of those setbacks, but in fact, in this case, even based on what area is left to develop, they are looking to propose some of the west side of the property, the walls, into that erosion setback. But in order to fit within sort of the developable, what looks to be the most developable portion of the lot, they are looking to move the home a little bit forward on the property, although it does still sit lower than the road, in order to create a modestly sized home. In order to sort of, the counter effect of having the home a little bit closer, they're looking to significantly landscape that front yard setback. You can see that there's a cross section. Again, it highlights that the house and the auto court itself sits lower than the street. They'll look to berm it, have a retaining wall, add mature plantings that come from the site itself in order to help buffer that front yard so that that front elevation doesn't come across as strong and feel close to the street. Again, it is still 35 feet setback from the property line. So regarding citizen participation, they did comply with the requirements, sending out the notification letters. I did speak with 3 residents about the project. One person did have concerns of the home being close to the road. Other 2 residents had no issues with the home. They were just curious about why they received a letter and what the request was about. And as you saw in the report as well, one resident reached out to the applicant's architect who didn't have any opposition or concerns about the proposal. So this is a little different. This is a public hearing, which Chairman is familiar with. He will open that up for public comment. I'm happy to answer questions first. We also have the applicant and their architect here as well if you'd like to ask them specific questions. And we also have Mark Millstone, the town engineer, if you have any questions related to drainage that I can't answer. Any questions?
Open to the, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I am terribly confused by how far we're setting back or not setting back.
Okay.
On the yellow page, it says 25 feet would be, encroachment would be 25 feet.
Right.
On the first page of your staff report, it says 30 feet.
Right, I'm sorry, I apologize.
And
That,
then on this table, it says 35 feet, which would be 25 feet. And then the architect is citing different numbers. What are we being at? The architect said it'll be set back 15 feet or 45
45
from the
feet
street.
from the edge of the street.
So I've got, this is.
I'm happy to
taken
help
over.
clarify that for
Okay,
you. I
thank you.
apologize first of all for the typo. It's not a 30-foot setback for relief. It's 35 feet from the property line. The way that we do it in Planner Ease, when we place the legal ads, you're encroaching 25 feet into that setback. So your home, which is typically 60 feet back, you're pushing it 25 feet into that front yard setback. That's the encroachment. But from the property line, you're setting the actual structure back 35 feet. I do apologize about the 30 feet. That was my error. So they are asking for, it will sit 35 feet back from the property line and 45 feet back from the edge of roadway, I think is what he was describing.
Okay, educate me on the difference between 45 feet and 25. I'm sorry. The architect said that it'll be 45 feet from the street.
Right,
I'm lost.
okay, from the edge of pavement.
We're gonna encroach 25 feet into the 60-foot, which would be 35 feet.
Okay, we're coming at it at 2 different directions.
Just
Okay,
help me.
I will. So when I talk about the 25-foot encroachment, I'm inside the property, pushing the house forward 25 feet. That's 25 feet you're encroaching because you're supposed to be back 60 feet.
Okay.
But you're encroaching, meaning you're stepping forward or pushing into that setback 25 feet. So what that means is you're 35 feet back from the property line, because the property line is the far north boundary.
Okay.
Now, I think what the architect was trying to describe was that from the edge of pavement, the edge of roadway, and it's true, there's usually another 10 feet, which is, tends to be unpaved or can be sidewalks and things like that. That is right of way. He's saying, so when you're at the edge of the roadway, the home coming back is 45 feet. He's adding that additional 10 feet to, and I mean, you're welcome to ask him, but I think what he's trying to explain is that if you are at the edge of the roadway, you're really looking at the home from a vantage point another 10 feet. But in terms of the variance, we measure it from the property line. So yes, those measurements are looking at it from two different directions. Basically, the house is going to be set back 35 feet from the front property line,
As opposed to 60.
60.
Okay, on the, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Stacy, on the bottom of page 5, there's a sentence that says that I didn't really understand. The last two sentences of that last paragraph. Additional fill is needed in order to maintain this requirement as well as create a singular floor area at the first level. Development overall sits at a lower elevation than Long Rifle will help offset this need to raise the finished floor.
Okay, that has to do with the second request, the
Right.
fill waiver. And so what I was trying to describe was that rather than having a first floor that has multi-levels, because this was already a two-story home, to have a single level and to meet the floodplain high water surface elevation requirements, you need to be 1 foot above that finished floor to hold that level first floor. That's why the need for the additional 18 inches, I think at the most, at some for that first floor, for that fill height waiver. Now, the property, the development itself still sits lower than Long Rifle. As that, and I think it was, I don't know if, maybe I could explain this a little bit better. If you look at the cross section where the cursor is, so here's the street. They're looking to berm up and add planting for buffer, and then the auto court and the finished floor sit a few feet below that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any comments from the public?
Or do you have questions for the architect or for the town engineer? No?
No?
So then, yes, so you would open it up for public comment, open up the public
Open up
hearing.
for public comment?
Anybody from the public want to ask a question or speak? That's what this time is for. Thank you, Steve.
I have the property just across the wash.
Get closer to the microphone, please.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Can now?
That's better.
Hopefully, okay. My name is Richard Hand, H-A-N-D. I have the property just across the wash. So do I understand that nothing is gonna be on the other side of the wash then?
What part of the wash are you at? I'm not sure. Are you on the
Main
south
wa-
side?
Well, there's only one main wash.
I'm sorry,
There's
but
a
are you on
secondary
the
wash.
south side, or are you on the west side, or are you on
I'm
the
on the
east
west side,
You're on the west side, so you're the home that's adjacent to the property.
that's right.
Right, and so your question is what?
Well, you can see by looking at that it turns very at a right angle.
It heads up, it heads
Yeah.
to the north
And
of
I've
the corner.
had about a number of cars that have come around very quickly and gone into the wash and have had to be hauled out, literally hauled out, went through the trees. And so I'm sitting back quite a ways. And they're asking for a variance to move closer, and I'm concerned about, basically how safe it's gonna be with 25 feet. If the cars are now coming the other direction, they're gonna have that same problem.
Okay, thank you.
That's
I
my
mean, they're
comment.
heading,
And there's
there-
nothing
there's-
gonna.
the house will be set back 35 feet, and I understand your concern. It's,
Well,
you
my
know,
concern is basically the fact that I think it's gonna pose a health problem. Because I think cars come down that street and they have to make a right-hand turn. Long Rifle, it makes you could see, a immediate turn. And going the other direction, I've had cars come into the yard a long ways, pass through the wash and come out. And if Tom's the neighbor, Tom's aware of the fact that I've had, I guess, quite a few cars have gone into the wash. So I'm concerned about safety, basically.
Is that a high-traffic street? Is there a lot of traffic on Long Rifle, right along there?
Well, yes, it does carry quite a bit. Yeah. So I'm concerned about safety, and the set 25 feet isn't very far.
it's set back 35 feet.
35 feet?
35 feet from the property
Well,
line.
Whatever it is, you can see that poses a problem.
Well-
There's nothing that comes across. One of the things that you showed comes across is there part of the drain field going to be on the other side of the wash?
The septic?
Is,
Yes, the septic will be on the south side.
Are they going to run it through the wash then? How are they going to run that? I don't understand that.
Well, it's not uncommon to cross a wash. They'll go below the wash, or if they disturb it,
How
they'll-
deep is it going to be then?
I don't know that, but I mean, it's not uncommon to have
No,
utilities go underneath
It's not
washes.
uncommon, but the fact that wash changes elevation and it carries a lot of water.
Right, and I think that's something that they'll consider when they do put
Okay,
that septic
that's all.
system in.
I just wanted you to be aware of the fact that it is a real problem, or it can be a problem.
Right.
The setback could be a problem.
Right, I guess the way that, the way that I look at it as staff is that I think it's more important to maintain the integrity of the washes and not realign the washes and deal with any
No,
potential
I agree
drainage
with
impacts.
that.
So I
But
think,
I see that the part of the drain field appears to be on the other side of the wash. And now, if they're gonna build it high, they're gonna have to,
well, it's not
gonna be a
too
real
much, I mean,
problem
when you
getting
say
it.
high, it's not going to sit high on the property. They're just asking to have it be raised so that they can clear the flood,
Okay.
potential flood issues. But I think that, in order for them to build a modestly sized home like you would see anywhere in Carefree, they need a little bit more buildable area, and so moving it a little bit closer to the street is, I
there's a
think,
secondary wash
I think
too
moving it
that
a little
comes
bit closer
down
to the street
west
makes
side.
more sense than to impact the washes.
Okay.
But understand, we
That's all
understand your concern.
I have to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Anybody have any questions? No?
Well, if that's the case, do I have a motion?
Well, you need to close the public hearing first.
Huh?
Close the public hearing,
Close the public hearing, I'm sorry.
and then you can either debate or ask for a motion.
Anything amongst us?
No? Okay.
All right.
Sharon's moved, uh-huh,
Okay.
okay.
Got a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those not in favor?
Great, thank you.
Because it's gone through the way it's planned, the way it shows there.
Yes. Yes.
That's the case. The Board of Adjustment meeting is adjourned.
Okay, you need a motion to adjourn?
We need a motion to, I make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Who would be opposed to adjourning?
So now, the joint meeting of the Town of Carefree Planning and Zoning Commission, Development Review Board, and the Economic Development Advisory Board. We've already had a pledge of allegiance, so I don't think we need that again.
No.
So item number 1, approval of Planning and Zoning Commission meetings for March 13th. Any questions?
So move.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay,
Item
sure.
number 2.
All right, item number 2 is a mountainside case number 2102 MS. The applicant is architect Mr. Victor City. The owner is Mr. and Mrs. Tony and Annie Shiaka, and I hope I said that all right. Did I get it? Awesome. Thank you. We're looking at a property, actually, interestingly, adjacent to the one that we looked at last month over in Carefree Foothills. Lot number, 6360 East Arroyo Road. So we'll just go through this. I'm glad that you're familiar with our mountainside process. And again, this is interesting that I think there'll be some familiarity to you from our past case. So as you can see that the property is located here very close to almost, very much up on Black Mountain itself in the Carefree Foothills subdivision. Looking at it a little bit more closely, and as we get to some of the other exhibits, basically this lot has significant steep slopes all the way from, and they slope from northwest to southeast. There are some of the significant rock outcroppings that kind of carried through from when we looked at the lot at the south. And once again, they are part of that shared driveway in that location of those lots. So as you can see, the slope analysis, and in particular, the building envelope, which is defined by their plat and their HOA, sits right in the heart of the slopes that are greater than 30%. So this is truly a challenging lot to develop. With respect to, sorry, I left that highlighted there, our development standards in our rural 70 zoning district, similar to what we were just looking at, but we're going to look at lot coverages, a maximum of 13%. This proposes 3.75%. We have a maximum amount of disturbance of 39%. This is less than a third of that at 12%. A lot of that is due to the requirement to retain a lot of that disturbance with walls, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well under this application. The setbacks do comply in this case. 60 feet are also front and rear, and 30 on the sides. We'll look at that more closely on the site plan. Cumulative height is 38.5 feet out of 40 feet that are allowed, and a lot of that is due to, again, the need for the retaining walls. The main structure itself is 19.5 feet above finished grade, with a 20 foot above natural grade. I think this could be from the last project. I believe that the main structure is 18.5 feet, Victor, and then it's 23.9 feet. I think that's why I highlighted. I apologize, I didn't change that yet. But most importantly is that it does meet our height requirements. And so grading and drainage, the town engineers looked at this as well, and it does meet the town's development standards of that cut and fill and as well as the types of slopes. There's no spill slopes. There's no cut slopes that exceed 4 feet. The utilities, they will be serviced by Carefree Water, which is in transition, as well as tie into the Liberty Utilities sewer line, and sewer extension will be required, if any, by the owner. Under the Development Review Board purview, we are looking at a wall height waiver. And a lot of this is due to the fact that we've got slopes that exceed 20%, as well as the adjacency of some of the significant rock features. The environmentally sensitive features, again, are really the sloping aspect. I feel like I don't have the right, I apologize, I don't think I have the right presentation, but I think we'll just continue. It is Southwest modern architecture, very similar to what we saw next door, as well as kind of a general thematic kind of development that we see throughout Carefree in terms of quality architecture. They will be looking to do native landscaping and re-vegging as required by the zoning ordinance. So taking a look at the site plan, for one, you can see that there is a pretty significant driveway to get up to the property itself. Some of those pullouts were required by Rural Metro, the fire authority. You can also see that a lot of the utilities do follow the driveway underneath, which is another important aspect of development in Carefree. But again, the home sits nestled within the side slope. You can see the landscape plan does allow for re-veg and all the disturbed areas, but what I think is interesting to note is that the disturbed areas are really tight to the property itself. And in this case, as part of the Development Review Board's purview, they're looking to do wall height waivers. And so the benefit a lot of times with a wall height waiver is that it minimizes increased disturbance when you have to terrace some of those walls. And so in this case, they are looking at 12.5 feet for a maximum height for the front retaining walls at the front of the home. You can see sort of that vantage point. It's a view from the southeast side. What I think is important to note is that there's a nice combination of stucco and stone, so you're not looking at, even though we're asking for taller walls, it's not just one material, and of course the landscaping helps break up that sort of, kind of monolithic look to a taller wall. There are the need for also taller walls at the back of the home, which you will not see from the vantage point, as the home will be blocking that wall, as well as along the driveway, in order to sort of accommodate that turn that rural metro requires, as well as, again, allow for a vehicle to then access and get. You can see it kind of is in response to the fact that there's a need for the large retaining wall behind the home. So there's a couple of renderings to sort of go through. You can, again, I think this is a good example that kind of shows sort of that play of stone and stucco. It has a nice front facade, again, with a very kind of a low profile type of look. And these renderings were also in your reports. You can sort of see some nice vantage points. Again, glass, stucco, stone, with some nice horizontal sort of lines across the architecture. This is a public process. It's not a public hearing like we just experienced, but the public does have a chance to make a comment if they prefer to. But this is the participation requirements were met. There was a person that contacted the applicant and just wanted to understand what he would be looking at from his property. As well as I spoke with somebody and they wanted to understand sort of this mountainside process and sort of the interaction with the HOA, and I assured him that we coordinate with the HOA and look for their approvals before we move a project forward in front of a board. And so in conclusion, the conditions of approval are attached to your report, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or the applicant and their architect is here if you'd like to ask them questions as well.
Any questions?
We look right at Peter.
I'll just make the comment, when you say steep, you gotta capitalize the word steep for that.
It's one of the steepest we've seen in a while, yeah.
Capitalize it, oversized S.
It's a
right?
tough lot. It's a tough lot to develop. A lot of the lots left at Carefree are difficult to develop from the last case to this one.
We're gonna need really good architects and civil engineers.
You will, you will, yep.
How about the guys doing the digging?
Yeah, no
They're
kidding.
gonna be well supervised.
Okay.
Get out there and supervise them.
Mr. Chairman, Stacy, is this a 5-car or a 4-car garage?
It's 4.
What?
4.
4.
Okay.
Did I say 5?
What is Victor maybe, what is the nature of the lookout patio?
Yeah, great, and I'll come up to the DS. Nice to see everyone. So to answer your questions about the lookout patio, I believe that's the one near the entrance. Is that what you're referring to?
It goes from the back of the house up the hill.
Oh, yes. Got it, yeah.
It's included in the disturbance area, I
Yes.
believe.
As one of the conditions, so the HOA granted the buildable area as shown in exchange for moving it, and the one thing that the owners requested was that they could still have a walkway up to that lookout area to see the sunset, I guess. So we're not looking at any significant development there, just a pathway up there.
Something on the way up or something
Correct.
like that, just scraping it off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Can you tell me there, or maybe Stacy, I don't know how this works. There is an easement for access on the west side of the property. Is that going to be abandoned?
Right, Chairman and, Board Member Burns, no, each party decided to maintain that easement. And if you recall in the last case, they did have to be sure that the easement would not be blocked, so in case either property owner wanted to utilize it for whatever reason, they would be, permitted to do so, they'd have the right to do so. It sounds as though each property owner, at least these property owners, don't see that they're gonna, have a need to utilize it, but, and I guess they could look to abandon it if they both agree in the future, but it's going to remain for both properties.
And, I know that the pool isn't included in this, right?
Correct,
it
but I
for-
think it still needs to conform to the development standards.
Okay, is it gonna be infinity edge all the way around?
On two sides is our proposal, or I guess 2.5, as it were. Yes, that's correct.
Just out of interest sake for my edification, does that use a lot more water than,
I don't think it does particularly, other than through evaporation. You'll get a little more evaporation. We're also using that edge to provide the pool enclosure barrier so that you don't need an additional unsightly pool fence. So we're kind of trying to do two things at once with that.
okay.
You got any other questions? Questions from the public? Do I have a motion?
I move to approve.
A second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
It's a beautiful home.
Happy building.
It'll be interesting to watch it. So now, item number 3. General plan update. Who's got that one?
What do you think?
What do I think?
What do you think?
Does this look familiar?
What do you think?
Good luck.
Look,
Have fun.
have fun, right?
Oh, yeah, so much fun building a house.
They're gonna be combing the water works.
Huh? Oh.
It's beautiful.
Oh, it's a great general plan update right there, right there.
There you go.
There you go.
It's very gentle, isn't it?
Hmm?
It's very gentle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Help him out so he doesn't have to turn it on. Press the button, turn it on, will you?
And make sure that speaker, the microphone works. There you go.
Testing, testing.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'll speak loud.
We got nothing.
No, I just plugged mine.
Nothing.
Nothing.
We know. I think there's
Control,
only
Alt,
one
delete.
for it.
Yeah. If in doubt,
Power
reboot.
on, power on.
Yep.
I think it does take a minute, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see your screen now?
Yes. maybe I'll move over one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair and fellow commissioners. It's good to be back before you to talk a little bit about the general plan. So apologize for the technical difficulties, but tonight I have a few agenda items to walk through with you, and then we have just some updates and announcements to make at the end. But as you can see from the agenda slide, I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the vision statement in the current general plan, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the overall organizational structure of the plan. And then, as I said, we'll close with some homework assignments. Everyone's really excited about that. And that was just for you, Ralph. I wanted you to have something to keep you busy. To jump into this and maybe to give some context here, as you all can imagine, when we're preparing a general plan update, making sure that we all are working off of the same sheet of music and the same vision. This certainly, talking about the vision statement of the plan, is one of the things that we want to start with. But within that context, also you might be thinking, it seems like not a very big topic to talk about the organizational structure of the plan. But all of the feedback that we get tonight is actually very important to guide us on how we draft our writing. Because the basis of what the vision statement says, and then what goes into that, and then how that plays into the structure of the general plan, really will guide some of the crafting of the language because of where its placement is within the general plan itself. So rather than just jumping in and starting to talk about other aspects of the plan, we actually like to first understand how we want to approach this so that we can then more thoughtfully look at the contents of it. So in terms of talking about the general plan vision overview, people can craft vision statements for many different things and in many different ways. But when we're looking at a vision statement for a general plan, I like to make these bullet points and emphasize that, as you can see on the screen, we want to look at this from a future standpoint of where we want to be or where Carefree is in the future. So it's aspirational, what we're working towards. It can be utilized to inform decision makers when they're evaluating certain projects within the community. So again, that's why we want to speak about it in the sense of what we want to be and not necessarily talk about where we've been. The other aspect is we favor typically vision statements that help to identify how the community is unique. Every community, again, approaches it a little differently. Some like a very succinct vision statement, and then sometimes that takes away, I think, some of that uniqueness, because it might, if you go or cut too deep, can be very simple. We've had communities that say our vision statement is we want to be a place where you can live, work, and play. If that's kind of captures everything that you want your community to be, then we can work within that. But we also like to encourage our communities that we work in to think about what makes you unique and see if we can work that into the vision statement. Again, comprehensive, long-term, visionary, and positive. We like to emphasize that aspect of it. And then last, I'll just say that remember that we're looking 10 or 20 years into the future. And so within Carefree, it may not be as prevalent in other communities that, see significant amount of growth, and therefore their vision may change over the course of 10 or 20 years as that growth impacts how the community views itself. Within Carefree, I think we don't see high levels of growth, and from what we've heard from the community in our initial conversations is obviously we hold very high our character and heritage within the community. So, so that aspect may not be as much of a talking point as it might be in some other communities. Of course.
So is the vision statement supposed to be written from today's, presence in today, looking to what we want by 2030, or looking at it from 2030 and making a statement about what we are as of 2030?
Good question, Commissioner Burns. The full answer is we can make it what we would like it to be. We tend to favor the latter, where we are at 2030 and this is who we are, as opposed to we are here today and this is what we're working towards. So we like it to be something that is worded in a way that says carefree is XYZ, as opposed of carefree strives to be XYZ, because in many instances our vision statement is capturing something that often some community members want to preserve, and so it's not necessarily that we are working towards something. We might already be there. Any other questions or thoughts from that aspect?
Is this new plan 2030? Because it seems to me that the existing plan was called 2030. So what is the new plan to be called?
That's a great question, and it's something we discussed from a staff and consultant standpoint, because we like to go over that as well. Every community, because of state statute and the fact that you have to update the plan every 10 years, some communities like to favor looking forward. So they say, okay, if this is, you drafted in 2020, then it's the 2030 plan. And that's how it previously was prepared. But what we saw with the pandemic is that impacted the timing, and now you start to kind of get off track from the dates. And so it was discussed within our preliminary conversations of possibly moving away from a date and just saying this is almost like the Ohio State, this is the general plan. There doesn't necessarily need to be dates associated with that, but if there were a strong preference, we can certainly approach that conversation. But at this point in time, I think we're tracking more to get away from thinking about these dates and look at it more of this is looking forward, but not date specific. Questions, comments?
Well, so a question or our objective tonight, I mean, I've read all this a couple of times now. It's got a lot of statements and everything else. So what are we adding to it tonight? Just additional questions, or?
Yes, so tonight it's, this is again a work session. So this is really a point where we can utilize the commission as a sounding board to get your input, but we are not crafting this together and wordsmithing it. We're trying to get some general statements of guidance from you, and then we would take that input, refine it, and once we refine the vision statement at our next community workshop, which is at the end of this month, we will be taking a revised vision statement if we all feel that there needs to be significant revisions to the public for them to evaluate those revisions. And based off of that feedback, we then continue to refine it. So I did bring a board if we wanted to pull it up, but at our first community workshop, we asked the public, in essence, kind of the same questions we're going through this evening of what do you like, what do you dislike about this vision statement? And so the public shared their comments at that first community workshop. And so this evening we wanted to kind of have a deeper conversation with all of you that you can't necessarily get through a post-it note, to see if you think that a longer vision statement is something that is important and captures better the community, or if we would favor something more succinct. And so part of the process with that is some leading questions on the side there that can be utilized to help guide us. So rather than you go in there and tell us specifically, I like this statement or that statement, you could almost also say, these are the things I think we need to hold dear and carefree, and then we work to make sure those type of comments are preserved in the vision statement through the drafting process. This is the vision statement in the current general plan. And so the question,
Written from 2030 looking back. This is written more from today looking forward.
I would say it's looking in a couple different ways, yes. So that's part of our question, right, to all of us is,
The last two paragraphs are written
Right.
forward looking as opposed to
correct. And so, again, I don't want to, establish a specific approach from my vantage point. This is kind of trying to get the viewpoint of the commission about what you think is more favorable. From the comments that we received, a lot of the residents actually pointed to the third paragraph saying, this is what we like. It needs to be more condensed. And so the third paragraph seemed to capture what a lot thought was succinct, and that the other items might be something that would be captured more. When we assisted Cave Creek in their process, they acknowledged wanting a more succinct vision statement, but there was still aspects in the community that were very important. So they utilized values statements to help clarify what those statements would be. So as an example, you look at the third paragraph and it says the community aspires to maintain its characteristics of a community with high quality of life, a vibrant town center. And so within that context, they then utilize those value statements to help clarify what does vibrant mean? What are our characteristics of a quality environment? And so that's kind of how they approached it. When we assisted Paradise Valley with their general plan, they have a statement, a longer vision statement similar to this, but from a vantage point of this is who we are at a future point in time. So it really is kind of up to the communities about what we feel would be or resonate with residents the most. And so that's why we don't want to get heavy-handed and start making changes without kind of hearing from you about what your thoughts are overall on the statement. We don't even have to get too bogged down in the wordsmithing or anything like that.
Well, I think it's, if I may, it's stated out pretty decent. And then if you go to the fourth paragraph, the last sentence, that maybe says it all. I'm not sure what more I could add to it or take from it. Where it says we'll see the challenges in the future to enhance its vibrancy given the commercial encroachment from nearby communities. We now have we got all the vacant property that exists, including the town parking lot on the south side of Cave Creek Road, and then the two corners that brought up, and then I don't know how much kind of a big an argument you might have over the 45 acres that the state has out there. I mean, that probably should be done over alcohol because there's that many inputs on it. But I think the rest of this pretty much says what, I can't think of anything I would add to it. I mean, that last statement, the last sentence in the fourth paragraph pretty well says it. Now we need to get specific to act on it as things show up one way or the other to bring them in. I think we're all pretty much headed in the same direction, so I'm not quite sure what more we can add if any commission can think of something else.
I went to that community workshop, and my own personal preference from prior experiences, I prefer a tight, concise vision statement. So that, for example, in the last paragraph, I think you say it all in the first sentence. The other sentences wind up being expansion of that point, how that would be manifest. So perhaps one suggestion would be to do a second draft that is very tight and see how the community reacts to either the lengthy version or a tight version.
I think that certainly that's exactly how we approached, we had four versions, if you will, a lengthy one, moderate, and a very succinct one. So I definitely agree that regardless of where this conversation goes, that we would want to provide the residents with those options, if you will, in terms of not saying this is the vision statement, but this is based off feedback, one approach to that vision. But yes, I think that is why we like to get this type of feedback, because you all will have a better sense of sometimes just specific words you think are not that significant, and they actually are, like semi-rural neighborhoods. That's not low density to maybe others in other communities. That is, no, semi-rural is different than low density. So it's those little nuances that that we zero in on as we refine it, but that feedback of doing a very succinct approach is very helpful to us, and so I think we can certainly explore that feedback. Yes.
One of the problems, and I mean, I'm using the word problem, but I mean, for lack of a better word, is the state land. I mean, there's so much misconception out in the community about what control we have or don't have over this state land thing, and who's gonna develop it or not develop it or do whatever. And to me, that's a big problem for putting a general plan together, because people wanna put state land into the general plan as something that, this is what I want done on the state land. And it might not be able to be done because of the way we don't have the actual control over the state land. And this is something that I think is a problem. I guess I would call it a problem. And when you're putting together a general plan, because it's right in the middle of our town, but we don't really have total control over what's gonna happen there. And that's gonna be, in my opinion, a problem over the next 10 to 20 years where we change. I mean, yes, if that gets developed, will we have total control over what happens there? No, we won't have total control over what happens there. I don't think so. I mean, unless I'm wrong, but from my limited knowledge, I don't see us having total control of what's gonna happen there.
So if I could unpack that a little bit and explore that, going along with these lines of options, one way we would approach a comment like that would be going back to that notion of sometimes communities will utilize, again, a succinct statement to be very clear, but then guiding principles or values, whatever terminology you would like to use, to help give some more clarity to the nuances that are unique to the community. And so that might be another option that we consider, is that if we recognize there are those specific aspects that need to be guiding elements in addition to just a broad vision statement, that's certainly something we could explore as well.
Because when you hear, well, I want a park there, I want a dog park, I want this, I want that, and I'm going, well, right now, the council we have, or any council in the future, you don't really have the control over putting a town park there or a dog park, unless some member of the community, I don't know how much the state land is gonna go for, but say it's gonna go for 15 million or whatever. Oh, you wanna write a check for 15 million of your money, and now give that to the city, to the town, and now we can discuss what we're gonna put there, because we own it now, and we can do what we want. But I haven't seen anybody step forward with a check yet, so I don't know. I mean,
And I think we would, want to refine that. You definitely make a great point, because that's certainly something that the community has brought up with us. So we're obviously very aware that that's top of mind. But obviously, I don't know that anyone would say, well, yes, it's key to the community, but I don't know if it state land per se is a value of ours or something. So we would probably still explore the state land piece within the land use discussion for the general plan as we continue to move on, but probably refine that statement about just how we treat open space within the community or future development within the community, those types of
And what actual control the general plan could really have over that.
right. And we can certainly, we're a on-call consultant for the state land department, so we're very aware of their processes. And so we fully expect to outline what that process is within some of our community workshops. So it's kind of like a tutorial, if you will,
The reality
of
people, yeah.
these are what we're focusing on, but by the way, if you'd like to learn more information about the state land process, here's how that works.
Is that gonna happen at the April 26th meeting?
We hadn't necessarily anticipated getting into land use at that 26th meeting, but if I'm hearing from all of you that it is going to come up regardless,
Yeah.
then
Last
we,
month it did, quite heavily.
Yeah,
From
then-
people's comments that came
Oh,
here.
it'll come up.
And
I
they thought that we were
guarantee
voting on it or something that day. I was a little confused with that. So I think it's gonna come up. I think we should address it, clarify that piece.
then with that input, we can most definitely have that be part of the conversation.
They're gonna ask. Yeah.
People will bring it up, yeah.
Hey, Matt, can I ask a question? You said you
course.
brought the board from the first workshop and
Yes.
it kind of did the exercise of what people sort of saw the town or their values or priorities. Do you see any of that information playing into the statement that we have, or how that information might affect what we have currently as the vision statement? 'Cause I read the vision statement and I can see where there's some tweaks, but I don't know, it sounds a lot to me of, and this is just my opinion, of what I think Carefree residents still see.
And that's exactly, I think you make a great comment that overall, we simply, I mean, I can bring the board up,
Oh,
but
that's okay. Well,
we simply asked, we had the vision statement in the middle. On one side, what do you like? On the other side, what do you dislike? And most of the comments, post-it note comments, were on the dislike side of the length.
Matt, look what he's got.
There we go. There,
Yeah, okay, that's
all right,
cool.
helpful.
That's how you guys did it, all right.
So you can see I like all of the post-its pointing to that third paragraph. And then on the dislike, a lot of it is the vision statement should be succinct, and then a post-it note next to it saying, I like that post-it note. So, but
that was succinct.
I think I also pause because that is helpful, but it's a handful of post-it notes on a board, right? So that's where we come back to the commission to say, okay, we're not going to completely just put our heads down based off of one evening and the members that were in the community at that time. If you read this and feel kind of similar to Stacy in that, okay, maybe we massage some things and we can reword it to be, thank you, Steve. Yes.
Well, wait, how about the people in the audience? I mean, did she see it too now? Make sure she saw it.
So, I don't want us to get, analysis paralysis and go, I'm not sure which way to go. Maybe what we can do within the direction that we've given is that we can see how we might modify this longer version to be kind of forward-looking. But what we could also do is do that succinct version and break out some of the stuff that we cut, if you will, and show how that might be a guiding principle or a value. Because I think that's where people start to bristle a little bit, is when you just say it's gone, right? That it didn't go anywhere because they won't be confident that it's going to find its way back into the plan within the document itself.
Well, we're not trying to be specific per se right now, we're just objectives and goals and all this, right?
All we're talking is just the vision statement, right?
Yeah.
We're not even getting to the goals yet.
Right.
That's going to be your
When
homework.
you just break it down, it says it pretty well in the beginning, the things in Carefree. I mean, I've lived here 22 years. I mean, what we got left is a vacant ground, and the stuff that we talked in the town center of redeveloping, or the other vacant ground, and the 45 acres, and we kind of keep forgetting that there's another, 30-some units developed, and the streets laid out for that aren't being used. I mean, that's something.
She's looking at you.
What are you talking about?
Well, just to the very east of the state ground, there's
Oh, Stage Creek,
30
Stage Creek
30
Estates,
some
I
lots
see.
laid out. There were street names and everything.
There's a
And
plat,
the guy
that land
pays
is
taxes
platted.
on each lot every year, and nothing's transpired since I've been here.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, so effectively, if you wanted to put everything in one line, what we're really looking at is our vision for the space we have left to develop. And
we're not gonna
remodel
tear
the
down
existing stuff and the few vacant lots we have to build new homes on. But the rest is bring everything into the 23rd century. You can
And-
put it all down in one sentence and save all the rest of the stuff.
This is true. And I think I don't want to cut anyone off in terms of other input, but we might even want to, because as I mentioned, the approach, if you will, of the vision statement doesn't have to, but can find its way into how you are organizing the document as well. And so we might even want to, everyone kind of shared input, we may even want to go to talk about that structure as well, and that might change someone's perspective, because I do have some comments that parallel or play off of Chair, your point about you can be very succinct and still capture a lot of what's in this vision statement. But I do think that the overall comment was very sensible in terms of if everyone agrees that whatever comes out of this is not going to be, this is the version, it is a version.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
It's not gospel.
yeah. Of course.
Just make a quick comment. You know, when we get into these documents, especially when it comes to the general plan, we get so, I think, sucked into the land use, and we look at the form, and we look at the visual aspects of it. But, you know, I think one of the things that gets lost is the customer service delivery model. Like, what services do citizens or residents want? What services can we strive to put together? So if we're looking at a park, well, then we should look at the types of recreation, the types of park services, those types of things, and maybe look at it from a service delivery perspective. I mean, we're going through a whole conversation about fire service, but yet we've never outlined in a document what ultimately do we want fire service to look like? Do we want the automatic aid model, or do we want it, is that something we strive towards, or is it not something we strive towards? And so I think to avoid these kinds of things, I think it's important just to look at it also from what services and that you want to see as part of what we provide in the community. And that will actually help then shape the land use conversation, will help shape the other things that you need to accomplish, whether it's from economic development or finance or, you know, and I think I would add that. I just suggest adding that to the conversation as you start to look at these vision statements. So,
Was that the overall framework you're talking about? Is this kind of like when you break it down and you start talking about the subcategories
Right.
of the focus?
So yeah, let's maybe, that's a good segue, and thank you, Steve, for that, because it is a good segue for the structure conversation of the general plan and what are those services that are important to residents. So this slide here basically is just the outline of the current general plan. So the current general plan has an introduction. It makes the vision, or it provides the vision statement, obviously, right up front. And then the chapters are broken out based off of as we discussed in prior conversations, the required or elective elements per state statute are the individual chapters of the plan. So you can see here land use elements a chapter, circulation elements a chapter, and so on. Within each chapter, the organization of those chapters is we have an existing conditions report for that topic. Then we have, back to the chair's point, goals associated with that element or topic, and then the objectives or policies that will help achieve that goal. But then what's also interesting is the general plan does not include any action statements. That's something that we might consider with the community, is that once we establish what our vision is, the goals, and then the policies to achieve those goals, often we'll provide a schedule of actions, specific conditions within the community that can help achieve some of those recommendations. So I wanted to first get everyone on the same page in terms of what a traditional general plan is structured. This is probably a textbook general plan, so there is nothing wrong with this structure. And again, not to use other communities as a go-by, I just share it just in context. Paradise Valley general plan is, we recently took theirs through the update process and had this exact same conversation about structure, and they wanted to preserve this very traditional approach. They said it was familiar to everyone in the community, and it was able to reflect it right back to Arizona revised statutes, and therefore let's just keep it very focused and rigid, if you will, in that aspect.
Well, Matt, well,
Yes.
they also, they're in a different situation, a different location, to put it mildly, than Carefree. They're surrounded. You know, it's not like, oh, they got all this wide open spaces around them. No, we have wide open spaces still around us.
Yep.
How long, I don't know. But a lot of it will be for a long time because it's state land and stuff. But, and I'm not talking about the 45 acres, I'm talking about
Yeah.
federal lands too.
Continental now.
So it's really two different
Yeah, no, well,
situations.
Ye- well said, Commissioner, and that's why I emphasize that I don't share examples of, hey, they did it this way, so
No,
Carefree, but you're spot on that we want to take the aspects of the community in mind to tell us what would resonate the most within our neighbors. So here is the current format and a very traditional approach. What we'll show, again, example, because we took Cave Creek through this same exercise. Their general plan was laid out by element. But as we spoke with the community, they were very proud of how unique they are. They were very proud about the elements that make up their community that are different from those ones maybe further south. And so as we discussed it, it sort of evolved into this, well, we have more themes that we're trying to emphasize that help define what our community is about. And we would like the general plan to be organized around these themes instead of these elements or topics that might be more neutral. They wanted something that might speak more to how they viewed their community. So we ended up crafting these themes that all play into the vision. Now, when you see that in its totality on this particular slide, I would just say what you can certainly read all the components of it, and even through the revision process, some of these subtitles and themes were modified, like balanced growth on the third one there changed to managed growth. So even the community continued to refine it as we went through the process. But my point being here is that the overall framework now is organized by a set of themes, and you can see some of the topics or elements just become just that, topics or elements in that specific theme. So it's not completely blowing up the overall organization of the plan. It's just trying to look at it from a different lens to see if that is important enough to distinguish the community. And so you can kind of see that some comment or some topics in those subheadings, like a distinctive town, none of those items in that second or middle box are state required portions of the general plan. But that happened to be what was most important to Cave Creek residents. So we ended up making a whole chapter about portions that aren't necessarily required per state statute. But then you navigate to the sensitive development, balanced growth, and all of those items are specific elements of state statute: land use and growth, public facilities, and cost of development. So I'll stop there and see just generally what the general feedback and thoughts are. But again, you can start to maybe see how that would influence our writings depending on how we organize the document.
Going to the next box on the left here on the bottom, vital environment, from their perspective here, with their water resource and water quality. Well, the water quality, yes, that's a problem. I mean, it was a problem. That's why a good section of Carefree that we were being served by wanted out of their water situation, but the quality wasn't there, from our opinion. So a lot of this stuff, it depends. It's going to sound corny, but it depends on who you talk to about what certain people put as important. I mean, you could talk to a bunch of people in our town, and all of a sudden, the state land is the biggest concern for them. And then you could talk to some other people, the water quality and the water resources is the biggest, and should be up there within the top 3, in my opinion, because of the fact that we have a water problem in this state, not just in Carefree or not just in Cave Creek, but it's an issue in the state, and it's an issue in the whole West, for that matter. Yeah. So it really, I think to try to get a consensus of what people think in this town, it's not going to be that easy, in my opinion. It's not going to be that easy at all. No. I mean, because, just looking at what's been going on now with this property tax, I mean, it's just not something that people are lining up and going, yes, this is important, or this is important, or I want this, or I want that. No, I mean.
Well, not to cut you off, Commissioner, but you're making all sound comments. I would just maybe offer that we don't need to get down into the specifics about what those topics are today. Mm-hmm. What we're almost just asking is, do we think that the community will respond better to a document that might be catered specifically to viewpoints and language that you often hear in the community, and that's the first words they see? Or would it be just as fine to stick to the script and say, guys, this is why state statute requires this, and so this is why the plan is organized this way?
So that's where I would head too on this, yeah.
Yeah.
We got a guideline here. I mean, everyone could come in here and put a different sentence in and whatnot, but effectively, the guideline and the outline is excellent, and I'm not sure what more we can add to this or take away from it.
Go ahead, Chairman.
I've been trying to say that I think the challenge here is you've got some specific requirements that have to be covered for the state. No matter how the community reacts, if you haven't covered those elements, your plan isn't gonna work. Having read the existing plan, I think it makes much more sense to go element by element. And if you identify some themes that are important to you, you can address the themes within the elements. But I look at this alternative structure for Cave Creek, and for example, sensitive development and balanced growth are an attractive theme, but a key issue, which Ralph said, it's water, and yet water isn't addressed anywhere there. You can't develop if you can't have water. and yet the water is only in vital environment. So I think you miss covering what the state wants you to cover if you don't do it element by element.
That's the feedback we're looking at.
In other words, a reality check.
Yep.
I think what would be helpful for me when I look at this, if there was like an REQ to the things that are required, so I understand. And I think that'll help for people too when they come to the workshop to say REQ, wherever that is. And this is open for discussion or,
Yeah, so the starred ones there reflect
oh,
the
that's it,
requirements.
okay,
Okay.
thank you. I didn't-
Sorry, ARS is Arizona Revised Statutes, so
Okay.
that would be your.
And that's, I think that answers what Sharon's talking about as well, is to be real clear on that for us. And you have it clear. I just didn't see it because I was on a different page.
Yeah, no problem. I'm
So I
glad
think
you
that's
brought
part of the workshop though, explain that, right? When people come to the community, they'll hear this. These are things we have to do.
Well, I think, part of our work sessions and the value of the commission is that we need to be very, I guess, focused when we're working through our workshops. So we weren't necessarily looking to have a in-depth conversation with the community about the overall structure of the plan, because we have so much in the plan to get into and
Right.
discuss. So that's why we like to have a conversation about the structure at a finer degree, and then when we go to the public, we can be more focused on some of the bigger topics like the state land piece, and not get bogged down on people deciding on what should the title of this chapter be.
So this is just the structure you're showing us that you want to take to the community now. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, we're looking for guidance on what you all think would be a more favorable approach of being a more traditional or something more, I'll say, catered to the specific aspects of the community, if you will.
Well, I'm
All
kinda-
of it's gonna be catered to Carefree,
Yeah.
but in terms of how, if you pick up this document, and you look at it for the very first time, are we going to just see these chapters that, with the elements required, or something different? And so that's why I just wanted to show you the different options to see what resonates with you, and there's no right or wrong answer. Like I said, we've gone through communities that say, Matt, don't get too fancy, don't complicate it, and then other times it's, man, this isn't us, we're totally different than this, how can we adjust this and still meet state law?
See, that was the key thing you just said. You wanna be flexible, but we can't be super flexible, because the state basically controls the situation. So that it's not like we can say, well, I wanna do this, and then we look and go, and the state says, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I don't wanna drive the perspective, but another example of the city of Phoenix decided to go with a themed approach, right, for their whole general plan. And so what they ended up doing is utilizing a table like we do in a lot of our other communities that have a lot more topics that you have to cover. So we'll prepare themes, and then we'll have a table that says, here's your state mandated elements, and then here's your chapters or themes. And here's the subject matters that are covered in those chapters, and you just fill the boxes in,
And you
right?
can plug it in here or plug it in there, or you can't plug
But
it
the
in.
funny aspect for the city of Phoenix is they didn't plug in dots on one to the other. They just said, this chapter applies to all elements. This chapter applies to all elements. And
Well,
so
now you're really opening up Pandora's box.
it was just so I only share that in terms of how liberal communities are with state statute relative to that.
Well, I think you guys have done a pretty good job in this.
Oh.
I'm not sure we could add any more or take anything away from it. It's general enough, and now we can, later down the road, we can get specific.
That
So I think you ought to get a double attaboy.
Well, one thing that I think is kind of interesting, if I may, is it sounds like some of the communities, like Paradise Valley, I kind of see, we're different, Ralph, I agree, than Paradise Valley, but they're kind of coming to an end, I would imagine, of a developable land, and we're kind of heading there too, so I can see them having a very straightforward, user-friendly type of general plan versus Cave Creek, as much as they're a smaller community, they have a lot of developable land still, I think, available, so I kind of see them, I get it now in terms of organizing kind of thematically how these remaining, areas want to develop, so, like, I think what Matt's saying, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, we have to cover certain elements, it's whether or not you want to categorize them under themes, or if you just want to kind of hit them just head-on straightforward, but it's kind of interesting to think about it how, like Phoenix, again, they're a huge community, I think they went a little too broad there, but again, they went sort of thematically. I don't know if there's another relevant community to us that did it one way or the other.
What about Tucson? You know anything about Tucson?
Well, they're big.
Being in Phoenix's league,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, Tucson's is, they're actually going through their update process at the moment, but they used a very, I'll say, unique approach, even different than Phoenix. But the town of Gilbert, we assisted them with their general plan, and they utilized a theme approach. We're currently assisting the cities of Goodyear and Surprise with their general plans, and they have chosen to actually utilize their value statements as the organizing elements of their chapter. So here's our vision statement, but our values are we're a livable and connected community. We're a safe and prosperous community. And so safe is, getting towards police, and prosperous is economic development. And so those ended up being the chapter headings. And then we utilize a matrix to say this is how we're going to meet state statute for all of that. But I'll be honest, that's more work. If we stay in where we're currently at,
It has to be more work. Look at the size of those towns compared to little
Right,
Cavray
and-
with 3,700 people.
right,
In
and
a
they're
neighborhood.
like I said, Goodyear was the 10th fastest growing community in the country. So I would never want to convey that community is a good reference. So that's
it's
why
not a
I
good
go to
reference.
Paradise Valley and Cave
Not for
Creek.
us.
But again, I don't want us to get too bogged down in this nuance, but it does influence how we organize our community workshops and some of the exercises we take residents through. So that's why we like to not just make an assumption that, hey, let's just reorganize this plan because we think it's going to be fantastic, and then find out that it just confuses everybody.
Can you go through a thematic conversation, but outline the document? So when the final document comes together, it mirrors what the state law requirements are, but the conversations are more thematic or topic related in the community. Because if you go in and say, let's just talk about land use element, I don't know what people know of that, but if you say, let's talk about the state land, let's talk about the rest of our vacant land, let's talk about these land use decisions. That's what I'm trying to get to is, when I talk to people in the community, they don't talk in generality, they talk in specifics, and so,
Yeah.
and that's where it comes down to. And
This
so,
piece of property on this corner, yeah.
yeah, they
Right.
can get really detailed oriented, but we've got to get to a we got to make large statements, and large, we got to connect all the dots together to get from one place to the next if that's required. And it's a tough way. I know we're trying to figure out how the best approach to engage the community and be able to solicit the best information.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things that with whatever direction we approach, we can provide either graphic design elements to make connections, or you provide language to make connections. So typically what you see if you go a traditional approach is that you'll often maybe, because when you're talking about land use, there's back to the point that was made earlier, you might be talking about land use, but transportation impacts land use. Water resources impacts land use. And so there's plenty of examples where communities will say, this is a goal under land use, but it's working to help achieve some other goals in water resources as well. And so you use a little water drop or whatever graphic symbol to show that it's carrying on some other aspects. Other communities will repeat. They'll say, okay, we're gonna talk about water here, but we're also gonna talk about water and water resources. We would prefer to stay away from that, because then that's where you start to get redundancies and conflicting language and confusion. So, so whatever approach we go, we would probably favor making those graphic connections as opposed to being redundant, if you will.
I thought it was interesting, the idea of by values. I thought that was kind of an interesting, I hadn't thought about it that way. I mean, because our vision statement, I think, talks a lot. I think it kind of expresses values and, but I'm kind of more of, I don't know, values, but more kind of straightforward, because I just don't see us getting into something kind of bigger with themes and everything, just sort of based, and it's all up to you. I'm just thinking about how we use the general plan and use it with, you know, people who are interested to develop. And I love like those big themes and things like that, but I just don't know how it kind of applies to us, how we would use that in our to our benefit to make it a better development or place versus just kind of being sort of direct and.
And I'm confident, because we've done it before, that those aspects we still can emphasize within a traditional approach.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this or that. So I guess unless, I don't want to cut the conversation short, but I also don't want to pile on, that based off what I'm hearing, I think we're going to work towards maintaining a more traditional structure, but explore ways of how we can connect to values or show cross-pollinization, as we say in the general plan, about,
I would
hey,
agree with that.
this topic relates to this topic.
All right.
Okay. I'll, not to be long-winded, so Steve can get to his topics, but just as a straw poll, in terms of actions, do you think it's helpful that we might consider having a table that would be, so when I say actions, sometimes in the general plan you'll say a goal is to, you know, preserve our quality of life, and then a policy is that you know, we will only require, or we'll only allow one dwelling unit to an acre. But then the action would be go update the zoning code to ensure that that requirement is there. So the actions help give staff or members of the public confidence that if they're being very specific about something and asking why isn't that in the general plan, it's because it's an action, it's not a policy. And therefore, sometimes we'll have action statements so that we can show residents, hey, you said you wanted this effort to happen, you wanted design guidelines or something to that effect, and that would be an action. Having design guidelines is not necessarily a policy.
And this thing with the 1 acre, there's a lot of homes in Carefree that don't meet that criteria about having.
Well, that was just an example. I'm not saying
Yeah,
we're
it's not
trying
even
to.
go there. Well, no, that's what I'm just saying. So we gotta be careful when the public speaks, we gotta be really careful and listen to what they're saying, because in most cases, in my opinion, you hear a lot of gibberish, and you hear a lot of stuff that people don't know what the heck they're talking about, even though they think they do. And that's the scary part, and we've been seeing that a lot in this town for the past couple of years. Just talking in their fantasy world, and it makes your job more difficult, in my opinion. I'm sorry, I really believe that your job is more difficult.
We signed up for the task, so I'm not too worried about the difficult aspect, but yes.
Well, I know you're still getting paid, so you're gonna do your job and you're gonna do it. But I'm just saying, it's not an easy job for such a small little town. We got a lot of crazy problems, and I mean that because I love this town, and yet I can still say that.
Well, then you might even be emphasizing the point of it's better to kind of stay the course and not distract people
For
and
that
get off
reason.
topic.
Precisely.
Yes.
and I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so that's perfect.
Even,
'cause-
even you, though you're gonna have a few people causing trouble at certain meetings. But again, we're not gonna have all 3,700 people at these meetings. And there's a lot of people that don't get involved. I just see it in my own HOA, how there are some crazies in there, in my opinion, and there's some people in there that are just going, hey, I like what's going on, it just, you know, it's fine by me. I don't have to go to a council meeting, I don't have to go to any of these meetings. The town is okay as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we'll be happy to sit down with any resident that wants to vet that
One of many
discussion.
a year.
Yes. So with that, I'll just jump ahead to give you an update. We do have the community survey out there right now. Last check before I came here, we had 191 survey responses, which is absolutely
I
fantastic.
think it
Well,
is.
for
For this town,
3,900 people,
trust me, for this town,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
that's
With,
really-
if we were to combine,
Particularly in April.
we were to
True.
combine the cities of Goodyear and Surprise with the surveys we did for those communities, Carefree has already exceeded them combined.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We are awesome.
Because those, most of the people in those towns, they just, hey, I'm living in this town and that's it, in that city. Here,
So,
Different focus.
there's a group of people that take what's going on in this town very seriously.
and that,
Are they the majority? I don't know. I
and
don't
we
know.
actually see that more often in smaller communities. Cave Creek had a phenomenal response rate on their survey, so I wasn't really surprised, but I'm encouraged that that we have a high number, but I will be prepared for some residents to feel like it still could be higher, and we would love it to be, but in terms of comparison, it's a very good response rate, but there's
Well,
still
what is the
opportunity.
What are the responses? Are they wacky or they make sense?
Well, we're gonna share that with everyone
Okay,
because obviously that is gonna be
That is
more important to be transparent. So we're closing the survey on the 17th in order to have time to share those results at that 26th community workshop. So the idea being that we can share some of that feedback so that when we ask them to provide input on what vision statement approach would you like? And then we're gonna ask them to help validate some of the goal statements that are in the current general plan. And so they're gonna have some of that foundational feedback to hear what their neighbors said in order to maybe formulate their opinion. We did also receive comments on our existing conditions analysis, so from staff, and so we're finalizing that, and then we'll make that available to the commission as well as the public as well. But that existing conditions analysis is part of the informational process to show or allow residents to see how things may have changed since the last plan, but then also it's used to update the content in the plan. So with that, in terms of actions, this week we're gonna work with Stacy and staff to push out our goal comment matrix. It's a very straightforward. It just lists the goals from the general plan and asks you to read those goals and identify if you think they should be kept, removed, or revised. And you may say, well, I don't know if I'm completely, qualified on all these topics to respond, but that's part of the process. Is we want you to, based off of your viewpoint, which is where most of your neighbors are going to be, to convey to us how you think the goal statements, not necessarily how they read. You're more than welcome to comment as much as you would like, and we'll put these directions in the matrix itself. But we're just looking for, again, broad direction or comments about if you think something's hitting the mark or needs to be refined. So my last comment would be that second to last comment, there's one other item. We have our workshop on 4/26. That will be here, correct? And
What time?
5 to 6:30, yes. And so in that, you'll see that we're going to share the public outreach summary. We'll provide them with those vision options to comment on, and then we're going to have the same table of goals and ask them to use sticky dots and post-it notes to identify what they support and what they think could be refined. So the next Planning Commission or General Plan work session you see there is June 12th. What I'll also add that's not on the slide is we did, not this past weekend, but the weekend prior, we did have a pop-up booth out at the post office on Friday afternoon and Saturday morning. And so I was manning that particular pop-up booth, and as I shared with Stacy, in terms of quantity, it wasn't, you know, a high number of touch points in terms of residents, but quality I thought was great because one, Commissioner Burns was there, so you know, there's one.
That's
but,
where the quality went down. Yeah,
Yes.
we know that. That's where the quality went down.
But no, I wanted to just share that we're trying to provide those opportunities to inform residents that this process is going on. And I had some very great conversations with those residents that weren't, you know, on to other things. So we're going to continue to do those periodically through the process, and make sure that residents, hopefully, as much as we can, are aware of the plan overall. So if you think of other locations that you think would be important, or we did learn that Mondays and days after the holiday are the best days to be out by the post office, so we might look at those opportunities as well.
You done?
I am done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Yeah. We have one more item on the list, unless you want to delay it a month or 2 weeks.
I'll be fast, depending on how fast you guys want to be.
Sure? You? Steve, you say that? Come on now.
Delay him, delay.
I mean, I can go through a presentation if you want, or
Do your presentation.
Just go quick. I'm gonna get out of here myself.
start with this one. Good evening. Thanks again for staying here for a long night to kind of go through the stuff, but you know, I know Matt's just long-winded, and I will try to be brief.
He hasn't left yet.
Yeah, but I appreciate it. And I know last time, you know, I proposed the 12-month or 24-month work plan. And so, you know, when you do these things, you get so into your own head, and you're coming through from a previous administration, and you got a different board. And so the original plan that was put together was done in concert with a council objective of putting a work plan together. And the concept for this particular economic development work plan is, they call it a work plan, but I call it more of like a working plan. It's a document that just really outlines the objectives that we're going to be doing over any given 24-month period. And it really kind of stems from this council workshop session they did back in 2020. And so what they did was they created these 4 pillars, and there are core tasks that were assigned to these pillars. And if you look in the 3rd pillar, you can see under economic development and financial stability, economic development, one of the things that we were to do was put together this strategic work plan. But it really has kind of evolved more into this working plan. And the idea is that if you put a big giant document together, it becomes a big giant static document. If we do things in manageable bites and manageable chunks, and we look at 24-month periods, and we look at the activities that we want to do, but we know what the larger goal is that we're trying to achieve, it gives us the opportunity to say, okay, these are the things we're doing, and we can show that in an easier format for people to digest at any given time. So that's why this is a smaller document and not what I would call a formalized work plan. And the idea and intent is that when we start to get into the details of each one of these particular activities, we kind of have a general idea of what it is we're trying to accomplish, what we're doing, and how it fits maybe into a larger context and the larger goal of what we're trying to achieve. And the goal of having an economic development advisory board, which is what you guys will be serving as, is really to be more of a really a working group where we can have these conversations, where we can put the meat on the bones of the activities that we want to do. And so as we look at some of these things specifically, we will be having further conversations. But the idea is that instead of it being maybe necessarily in this format, that we'll work a way where we can get more at a table, where we can sit down and have conversations about what we're trying to achieve, and we can break that down into manageable agendas. And then from there, we can put together more specificity to the things that we want to do. And so then we can always go back and periodically look at a plan like this, the outline of what we're trying to accomplish in a setting like this, and kind of tell the public what we've done. These are the things, these are the outcomes. And so a great example of that is when we did the redevelopment plan. You know, it was outlined generally in the work plan, and we got into the specificity of putting together that specific plan, and now we have that plan. From there, now we can take those implementation steps and talk about how we're actually going to do that now in the next working plan. So that's kind of how this is designed to work. And so, you know, and I want to thank Commissioner Burns, because I think one of the things that was missing was putting together some specificity onto, okay, well, let's put some realistic timeframes. Let's look at like when we want to accomplish these things. And so what I don't want to do is tie us to a date, but at the same time, we should know at any given time what we think we should be working on, and we can hold accountability to that as well. So if it's, you know, and I'll give you an example. When the destination stay strategy that you saw in here, that was to be a deliverable of last plan, and it didn't get done during a specific time frame. So I included it into this specific plan to let everybody know, hey, we did complete that. We're moving forward on that. So that's kind of how this is supposed to work. And so you know, I know it's a little different approach, and I've done this in the past when I worked in the city of Peoria, and we utilized this approach with an economic development advisory board. It was formally informal, is kind of how I put it, but it allowed us to ask the specific questions. You know, you got something on your mind in this format, you may hold back. In a more conversational format, I think we're more inclined to ask questions and give advice and do those things. And it also allows the public to be able to participate and sit along and listen and maybe even chime in, because you get smaller groups of people who maybe ask questions. And so that's kind of, I just wanted to set the table of kind of where this is. And I know when we first established the EDAP, I kind of had this conversation, but a lot of you weren't here. And so I kind of felt like I just need to step back and do that. And so again, these are the overall goals, and I'll say this is kind of the overall goal of economic development. So when we look at economic development, why I was hired, it's really to look at how we diversify our sales tax base and our non-tax revenue. So for instance, we get money for putting Sanderson Lincoln on the pavilion. So we're going to be looking at all of these things, a way that we can maximize the revenue to the town, both through indirect and direct strategies. And then the idea is that when we go through this, it isn't all about money. There's a qualitative aspect to what we do. And so it's not a rush to get to where we want to get to. So when we look at the northeast corner, you know, obviously it's tempting to say, well, let's just grab this because we're willing to sacrifice this because we're going to get that, but maybe we got to think more clearly about really what it is we want to see. So, because at the end of the day, there aren't that many sites left, as Commissioner Cross stated, is we got to be careful about the way we handle the rest of this. So, so there will be a qualitative aspect to that. And then what I wanted to show is these are really just the deltas, the things that changed from the previous draft of what you saw. I did include a list of things that we, that again, what we're trying to accomplish, what the purpose is. I did add some achievements in there from the last go around of the plan. You know, a lot of the stuff to me is obvious. We know we did the general plan amendment. We know we did but it is nice to be able to document that. And so at the end of the day, let's say we get through 10 years of these plans. We got 5 plans. Somebody can look at all those plans, and they can see what that story tells. And so that's kind of how this is to be put together. We did add, I added some time frames and some dates. I did it by quarter versus trying to come down to a specific date. And then you can see that the targets are in there because that actually what came from the original council work plan was to add what these revenue targets are. Now these are more of a static target of what we were trying to achieve with each of these particular programs. And this is kind of like if we're successful and we can get it all built out, the question becomes, what can we achieve in any given year? We can talk about those things, and it really depends on how quickly we can move, and the market dictates a lot of that. And because there's not that many sites, you get one developer come in, it can change the whole story, or interest rates go up, and the next thing you know, we're 5 years out. So those are the things that we just got to evaluate as we have these conversations.
You might want to make a typing correction there. You get the Carefree Highway in Town Darlington, you talk about the northeast corner.
Did I do it again?
Yeah.
I do that all the time, and I don't know why. And Peter's going to kill me on it because he keeps telling me that I got to be.
You might try that NWC.
Yeah. So NWC and the which should be all reflected in the document. All those changes should have been made. Yeah. So.
This is shorthand version. The document covers it well.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
The document is excellent.
Yeah, and then one of the things that we did is I restructured the way we do the revenue expectation. I was showing short-term rentals in there because I was trying to figure out a way to catalog what short-term rentals mean, and it is a conversation we've got to have because there's a lot of people who don't like short-term rentals, but short-term rentals are there a necessary evil? And if they are a necessary evil, is there a way that we can do short-term rentals where we can take advantage of a short-term rental opportunity? So instead of approaching it from just trying to penalize short-term rentals, maybe we try to guide a short-term rental strategy that is more productive for the town.
And make
So,
a buck.
yeah, make a buck out of it, and still, there are residents that want to be able to maybe rent a room out. There's things that we need to do, but at the same time, we have to protect the residents from a planning perspective. And so those are the things that's why it's important, I think, that you guys as a board get involved, because you hear the comments from the public about people who do not like them in their neighborhood. But at the same time, you understand that, this could be a really good opportunity for us to be able to maybe generate some revenue in a productive way. And I did add Spirit in the Desert into the mix of the destination stay. They're tough because they're a nonprofit, so you really can't really count on their tax revenue because there really isn't any tax revenue. They do have indirect revenue, but they have their own restaurant, and so they bring people here. And there is an opportunity, so I don't want to discount that because they do bring thousands of people here.
Not gonna be big.
It's not big revenue on the side, but at the same time, it does add an element of destination stay. It does bring people here, and they may come back and say, hey, I loved it. I'm going to come back and maybe stay at the Hampton next time, or we'll come back, we'll stay at Savannah. Or maybe they're at an event and they live locally, and they'll come back to Carefree to do something. So it's very important to have that element added back in there. And so those are the things that really kind of, when we look at the structure of this, but from my perspective, I want to get to a point where this group, you got all of us here, planning, department, economic development, planning commission, or economic development advisory board, we're more at a conversational level because we're small and we can do that. And in Peoria, we weren't that large, but it was a larger city, but it worked extremely well. And so I hope this is the way I'm trying to take it. So I hope you like to document the way it is. And what I'm going to be doing is asking for you just really to kind of say, yeah, works for me. And I can go back and we can have this discussion at the council level too, and how it meets what their initial objectives are.
Good.
And if there's any changes you need to make this before it gets to council, we can still do that. I mean, this will be in a draft form
Well,
going
I like
into them.
the outline that you put together here, Steve, yeah. Well, I read the whole thing about twice and highlighted a few things, but this, put it in an outline form where you can, yeah,
Yeah, I do like it too.
get right on it,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's nice and cute.
yeah. So,
You got anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay, Tom?
I mean, if you guys have any questions, I mean, again, I know it's late. If you have anything you wanted to add to it, or if it looks,
no, I think you put a lot of good thought into this thing, and, it's an excellent outline. Is there any announcements, Stacy?
No, I don't have any announcements.
Well, make a
But I
motion.
think,
what I'm
no,
looking
I
for is,
think-
yeah, I just want to be able to bring this to council. If you think this is something I can bring to council,
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Anything else?
that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let them vote it down. I mean, what the?
I think he's looking for a motion to
Yeah.
recommend.
So,
county
so yeah, so
Motion
what I'm
for
looking
this?
for is just a recommendation to take.
We don't need a motion for this, right? We do?
You do, because we're taking the, yeah, council.
Well, I'll
Got a
move
second?
that you bring this
She
to
seconded,
council.
she motioned it.
All those in favor? Aye. Congratulations.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks.
I do have a question.
Hey, we adjourned,
Sure.
no.
No, no, before you
We
close the
adjourned.
meeting. On April 26th, what is the format? We're sitting at a table, are we sitting in here? What's the format for the community?
We're sitting in here.
It's gonna be the same format as the workshop one, so we'll do,
I didn't go there.
we'll do a presentation up front to get everybody acclimated. if you
Okay.
will, and then we break out into more open house style where people can go to different stations and provide feedback.
And what's our role? Are we here with them in the groups, or what's, is there a required role for us?
No, I mean, you can,
We can attend.
attend, and participate, but you're not really, I know it's hard to, I don't think you're really there as planning commissioner.
Okay, that's what I wanna make
We're
sure.
there
Right.
as
Okay.
residents.
I do have to make sure that, we have a
Right.
quorum covered, but I think you're there to participate. I
Okay.
mean, I think it's sometimes hard to take your planning commission hat off, but it might be, I always like going to certain meetings like that, just to hear what people have to say
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
And to laugh at them, you know?
No.
Yeah, just talk about it later, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that explains it, thank you.
Okay.
Making a motion to adjourn?
One question on that.
No, we weren't done talking.
If everybody does attend, do we have a quorum problem?
Yeah, so we talked
No,
about it.
the town clerk will put up a quorum calendar and accommodate for that.
You just can't talk to each other about business.
Make a motion to adjourn. Somebody make it.
Susie did.
Okay.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That was a lot of good work.
Good night. Good
Hey,
job,
guys,
Bryce.
thank you.
Nice job, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Steve.